Yemen's marked 12th anniversary of attack on Presidential Palace Mosque back in the year 2011. Infighting among rival Houthi factions escalates the capital Sana'a. Houthi shelling on the presidential areas in southern Hodeidah displaced many families. Good evening. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. I am Abir Ali and you are watching the English news. Almost 12 years have passed since the attack of the Presidential Palace Mosque in Sana'a. According to the local observers, the attack aimed to target the stability of Yemen and its democratic institutions. Many government officials, including the late leader Ali Abdullah Saleh, were injured in the tragic explosion. This report has more.
The 12th anniversary of the most heinous crime that Yemen has witnessed in its modern history, the bombing of the Presidential House Mosque in the capital Sana'a, a crime that targeted the President of the Republic, Ali Abdullah Saleh, and the senior leaders of the state, to expose the goals of the pretenders of peacefulness, targeting the holiness of time and place, the first Friday of the month of Rajab al-Haram, and one of the houses of God, by blowing up the Qur'ans, smashing the mihrab, and killing worshippers kneeling in prostration, a crime that didn't end its repercussions after it legitimized violence as a way to reach power far from decision-making democracy, to assassinate the present homeland and an entire people and drag the country into darkness, one above the other, and to the fire of war that doesn't remain or leave. A terrorist crime described by the UN Security Council targeted the achievements of the national struggle, democracy, and the foundations of its existence in the state and society by destroying the pillars of the state and its institutions in the army, security, and civil service. The crime of the Presidential House Mosque was a testament to the patriotism, wise leadership, and meanings of tolerance for President Ali Abdullah Saleh. Despite the enormity of the crime and the great injury that befell him, he restored to the law not bullets, cannons, and assassinations. Let the Yemeni people remember the crime of Rajab Friday and write down in the page of history the march of hatred and treachery that made from Rajab Friday to the 4th of December, the day of eternity, and threw the country into a dark tunnel. The crime of bombing the Presidential House Mosque on June 3 represented a milestone after which the country slid into a bloody series of control of power and the replacement of the fund as a civilized means for the peaceful transfer of power with a gun.
The member states of the United Nations General Assembly elected Denis Francis to be the new president of the General Assembly. The former president expressed his congratulations to Francis on his election. For his part, Francis stressed the importance of striving to develop policies that support and encourage investment in people and thus lead to the creation of social capital. 4 Arab countries topped the list of the Global Misery Index in 2022, including Yemen. Other Arab countries are Syria, Lebanon, and Sudan. The index includes 160 countries on the list of unhappiness. According to the index, Zimbabwe is the most miserable country in the world, and it has been among the 5 most depressing countries for 3 consecutive years.
Yemen. The worst famine the world has seen in 100 years. Right now, over 8 million people are facing starvation. Since the beginning of the war, 85,000 children have died due to the lack of food. We cannot allow this to continue. The Yemeni people can't wait.
France called on the Houthi militia to fully cooperate with the United Nations to implement the rescue plan for the Safar tanker. In a statement by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, France welcomed the launch of the cleanup process at the Safar oil export terminal announced by the United Nations. The statement also called on the Houthis to fully cooperate with implementing the United Nations rescue plan.
This is what the long journey is all about. The Safar sitting just off the coast of Hodeidah with a dangerous load. The operation will start tomorrow to make the Safar safe, to pump its oil and to clean the Safar for scrapping. We have arrived, and with thanks to all our partners and donors, particularly thanks to the government of Yemen. The Safar is the biggest environmental threat to the Red Sea at the moment. We are on our way to pump the oil from this dangerous ship with the help of this Endeavour ship that I'm on. The Nautica, our second ship, the tanker, will come to the side of this ship, and Smith Salvage will pump the oil from one into the other.
The Houthi militia carried out a campaign of bulldozing dozens of commercial stalls on the main street in Eb. Local residents have said that the Houthi militia brought in a bulldozer with a number of armed crews of demolishing dozens of commercial stalls. They pointed out that the stalls were swept away using a bulldozer and with armed force under the pretext of easing traffic congestion. Informed sources told Khabar News Agency that infighting among rival Houthi factions in the capital Sana'a is intensifying. According to local observers, such infighting could lead to major differences within the Houthi movement and might hasten its collapse. The following report has more details.
Disputes between the leaders of the Iranian-backed terrorist Houthi militia have escalated over the past few days, affecting directors and employees of the Security and Intelligence Service and the Judiciary. Security forces confirmed that Houthi disputes raged between the Minister of Interior, the head of the Security and Intelligence Service, and the Judiciary and the director of the Al-Mashat office. According to sources, the disputes began between the so-called preventive security services and the security and intelligence services against the background of the conflict over the tasks and powers granted to each of them. The infighting escalated to kidnappings, assassinations, and the struggle for decision-making processes between the leaders of the two agencies. The disputes escalated sharply to include the Supreme Judicial Council, accusing its leader of standing directly with the security and intelligence apparatus. As a result, the leader of the Houthi group, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, intervened and worked to calm the situation temporarily, after which prominent leaders were overthrown and others were replaced. The sources said the tensions still exist between the leaders of the Houthis and those agencies. Despite their perceived unity, the Houthis' armed forces are made up of a diverse mix of militants and professional troops. These forces are made up of almost 200,000 men, two-thirds of whom have been recruited since the beginning of the war. Special military groups and armed militias operate alongside the regular army under the direction of high-ranking Houthi officials, loyal tribal sheikhs, and other prominent individuals capable of gathering local support. While ideological devotion to the Houthi cause is demanded, local commanders have significant autonomy, acting as a network of militias involved in the extraction of levies and the recruiting of troops to help the war effort.
The Houthi militia demolished the house of the Undersecretary of Human and Financial Resources sector in Sana'a. In a statement, the Ministry of Interior considered the Houthi militia's demolition of house a clear violation of laws and norms. The ministry confirmed it will not remain silent about these crimes and will take all necessary measures to restore the rights to their owners. Houthi shelling of residential areas in southern Hodeidah has compelled many families to leave their houses and move to other places to seek shelter and safe refuge. Muhammad is one of those who had to leave his home in Makbana and come to Hais. This report has more details.
After he left his village with his family by compulsion as a result of the war, Hajj Muhammad Abdu had to relocate to this barren strip of land in the district of Hais. For 2 days, he and his family have been in this yard, sleeping in the open air, without shelter or food. With the rains pelting their tents, they found themselves in an even more grueling situation. Displaced people in Hodeidah are crying out for help as torrents of water flood their homes and wash away their tents.
We were displaced by the conflict. Houthi bullets were raining down on us. We left our village and relocated to Hais, where we couldn't find shelter. We set up tarpaulins, but the rains last night buried our positions. We are out in the open with no form of protection for us or our young children.
Humanitarian organizations and relief agencies must urgently intervene to alleviate the suffering of the affected households and provide their urgent needs, which include tents, plastic sheeting, fast food, foodstuffs, clothing, and mobile clinics.
البرد والله صرنا نلقى حاله وين تعبانين حالتنا حاله
Our condition is dire. The weather is frigid and we are forced to sleep out in the open. International aid organizations have provided us with no assistance.
Since the start of the war in 2014, there have been nearly 4.3 million people internally displaced in Yemen. These overpopulated camps are often damaged by flooding and fire. Families here have been forced to build their own accommodation using blankets and plastic sheeting, said a 2021 report by the UN Agency for Refugees. The report stated that the humanitarian needs of displaced people in Yemen had reached alarming levels due to the proximity of these camps to combat zones.
Coming up in the news. Hard living conditions force a pilot to work in stone cutting. Welcome back. Yemeni women have urged local and international actors to be part of the negotiating process in Yemen. According to some female activists, exclusion of women and other marginalized groups from any political talk will not lead to an inclusive political settlement. This report has more details.
It's gravely concerning that Yemeni women's opinions are not being heard in the peace process. In April, a Saudi delegation landed in Sana'a to meet with Houthi officials for Oman-mediated negotiations aimed at reviving the expired truce. Though officials left without reaching an agreement, news of future talks give optimism that peace is still possible. However, the continued exclusion of women and other marginalized groups from the peace process is very concerning. Women and girls have suffered disproportionately as a result of the war, with 10 million of them in desperate need of humanitarian aid. Yemeni women endure some of the world's most severe inequalities in terms of access to legal protection, justice, healthcare, and education, and the situation is deteriorating. The humanitarian crisis in Yemen is being made worse by recent limitations on the movement of women, mostly female humanitarian workers. Houthis prohibited women from traveling without a male guardian in 2022. This has hampered the work of female humanitarian workers. Many female staff do not have a mahram guardian to go out with them, which leads to losing their jobs and source of income. Women in Yemen suffer from all different kinds of violations and in all sectors, according to Muwatna for Human Rights. Since 2017, Houthis have restricted women's access to health services, particularly reproductive health care. They even interfere with the way women dress. Despite these constraints, women have allowed access for struggling foreign aid efforts, backed programs for child soldiers, opened humanitarian corridors, and mediated tribal disputes to liberate over 300 inmates. Women are laying the groundwork for post-conflict healing through this vital effort. Yemeni women have led humanitarian response operations throughout the past 9 years of conflict, and women-led NGOs have continued to work, despite acute financing constraints, to reach the most affected vulnerable communities across the country. These women are now seeking a seat at the negotiation table, as well as a presence at the forefront of the humanitarian response. Their voices must be heard so that they can raise a peaceful Yemeni generation. Yemenis need all sides to the crisis to establish a long-term political solution. Peace must be pursued through an inclusive political process that includes Yemeni women, youth, and civil society.
The American Center for Seismology announced that a 5.9 magnitude earthquake occurred in the Gulf of Aden. Also, the American Geological Survey determined that the epicenter of the earthquake was 238 kilometers southwest of the city of Mukalla, without reports of injuries or damage. The Minister of Public Health and Population, Qasim Bouhaibeh, discussed with the World Health Organization chief issues related to the health sector. Bouhaibeh stressed the importance of continuing donor support projects for the health sector until it recovers, praising the support of the World Health Organization. They also discussed the condition of the health sector in Yemen, the situation of combating polio, and other challenges facing the healthcare system in Yemen. Dengue fever has hit major displaced communities in Ma'rib Governorate. This comes amid shortage of medical equipment. According to some locals, neither the aid agencies nor the government are doing something to curb the spread of the epidemic. This report has more.
Dengue fever is spreading frighteningly in Wadi district east of the city of Ma'rib, where the displaced live in difficult economic and living conditions, amidst the high incidence of infection and the absence of health care. Al-Hussoun Hospital receives more than 20 cases of infection per day. People get infected with dengue fever as a result of lack of medication, which increases the risk of the spread of this disease.
We receive 15 to 20 dengue fever cases per day. We call on the speedy interventions with medical equipment and first aid. People can't afford getting treatment.
The spread of unclean water near the camps and the homes of the displaced has become a major reason for the spread of mosquitoes, the carrier of dengue fever among the displaced and the high incidence of infection, in addition to the overcrowding and the lack of means of protection for the displaced. Mosquito nets also increase the possibility of the spread of the epidemic and its transmission to neighboring camps, which foreshadows a catastrophe, in addition to the collapse of the healthcare centers in the country, which makes it really difficult to control the epidemic wave of dengue fever.
In Al-Husn camp, which has more than 700 families and African migrants, they suffer from the spread of dengue fever. We call on the international community and local authority to help us. We call on all humanitarian partners to help us and provide us with medicines and medical care. If dengue fever spreads more among people, it will lead to a humanitarian catastrophe.
The camps lack sanitary facilities, and the absence of health education makes the displaced vulnerable to epidemics that threaten their lives and exacerbates their suffering.
Here is a reminder of the main headlines. Yemenis marked the 12th anniversary of attack on Presidential Palace Mosque back in the year 2011. Infighting among rival Houthi factions escalates in the capital, Sana'a. Houthi shelling on the presidential areas in southern Hodeidah displaced many families. This is the end of the news. It was Abir Ali, and thank you for watching.